Up on Mountain News at 5:30, a pair of northeastern Kentucky men are sentenced to prison for producing and receiving child pornography. And the latest on Hurricane Milton's aftermath, as the death toll is now up to at least 25.
And the freeze watch that we talked about yesterday has been upgraded to a freeze warning. Details in a few minutes.
Dedicated to southern and eastern Kentucky, this is WYMT Mountain News at 5:30.
Good evening, I'm Steve Hensley. Two Greenup County men have been sentenced to federal prison for producing and receiving child pornography. Skylar Allen Mullins was sentenced to 35 years for the attempted production of child pornography and possession of child pornography. In his plea agreement, it was discovered Mullins used a social media app to exchange sexually explicit images of children. Mullins later admitted to using social platforms to swap material. Austin Hardin was sentenced to 7 years in prison for receiving a visual depiction of a minor engaged in sexually explicit conduct. In his plea agreement last year, authorities received information Hardin had been engaged in sexual chats with a person purporting to be a minor. Hardin admitted he had sexually explicit images of minors on his phone. In total, more than 600 videos and photos of sexually explicit conduct were found on Hardin's cell phone. Both former President Donald Trump and Vice President Kamala Harris are trying to erode support away from groups where they are trailing. Harris is going after reluctant Republicans, while Trump is wooing Hispanic voters and women. CBS's Natalie Brand has the latest from the White House.
Vice President Kamala Harris returns to battleground Pennsylvania and one of the most critical swing counties in the country, where she's making a play for moderate Republicans.
Trump may be running as a Republican, but the truth is he does not share those long-held Republican values of supporting democracy, of standing for the rule of law, and of faithfulness to the Constitution.
Her campaign says former GOP lawmaker Adam Kinzinger was one of more than 100 Republicans joining her at this Bucks County event outside Philadelphia, as well as Republicans who previously worked for her opponent.
I think we all recognize the courage that you are each showing to speak out so publicly and to put, as we are saying, because we truly believe in country over party.
Former President Donald Trump is courting Latino voters in Florida, taking part in a Univision town hall.
Tuesday in Georgia, he joined a Fox News town hall centered on women voters.
I'm the father of IVF, so I want to hear this question.
An audience member asked whether abortion restrictions will impact a woman's ability to get fertility treatments such as IVF.
The Democrats tried to attack us on it, and we're out there on IVF even more than them. So we're totally in favor of it.
We should take responsibility for the fact that 1 in 3 women in America lives in a Trump abortion ban state.
The latest CBS News polling shows Harris leading Trump among women voters nationally by nearly 10 points. Natalie Brand, CBS News, the White House.
Trump still trails Harris with Hispanic voters, but polls show her lead over him with that constituency is much closer than the percentage of votes Biden received in 2020. Former President Jimmy Carter has now voted in the 2024 presidential election. A spokesperson for the Carter Center says the former president cast his ballot by mail today. Carter, who recently turned 100 years old, lives in the swing state of Georgia. The Democrat has been in hospice care since February 2023. Nebraska's Supreme Court has upheld a new law that lets felons vote once they have finished their sentences. It comes just weeks before the election and resolves a conflict between lawmakers and state officials. In 2005, Nebraska made it legal for felons to vote 2 years after finishing their sentences. This year, lawmakers passed legislation eliminating the 2-year waiting period. Nebraska's Attorney General called the measure unconstitutional. Special counsel Jack Smith is pushing to keep the obstruction charge in former President Donald Trump's election interference case. Today, Smith told a federal judge the Supreme Court ruling on how prosecutors bring obstruction charges should not apply to Trump. The ruling narrowed how the Justice Department could use a felony obstruction charge to prosecute January 6th rioters. As a result, obstruction charges against a handful of the defendants were dropped. New York City Mayor Eric Adams appears to have lost a lot of support after his federal corruption indictment. According to the New York City Campaign Finance Board, donations to Adams' re-election campaign have all but stopped. After his indictment, only $250 was donated, which was on the same day the indictment was unsealed. Adams is facing 5 federal counts of bribery, corruption, wire fraud, and soliciting and accepting donations from foreign nationals. American officials expect Israel's retaliation against Iran to happen before the U.S. presidential election on November 5th. It is in response to a missile attack earlier this month. Sources say the timeline and parameters of the retaliation have nothing to do with the election. Still, they say Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu appears to be sensitive to any potential political ramifications Israel's actions could have here in the U.S. A federal appeals court will hear arguments on Sean Diddy Combs' effort to be released from jail next month. Lawyers for Combs have asked the U.S. Court of Appeals for the Second Circuit to reverse the lower court's decision denying him bail. The star's lawyers argue that the judge made a legal error when determining there were no conditions to address concerns about witness tampering or physical violence. An Alabama inmate who says he deserves to die is set to be executed tomorrow. Derek Dearman says his victims' families deserve justice and that his execution will finally provide that. Dearman was convicted of killing 5 people in a 2016 rampage near Mobile, all relatives of his then-girlfriend, Lynetta Lester. High on amphetamine, he attacked his victims with an axe and 2 guns as they slept, sparing Lester. One of his victims was pregnant.
All right, so we had a freeze watch yesterday that we were talking about. That has since been upgraded to a freeze warning. Here's the latest advisory. Freeze warning is in effect until midnight, or starting at midnight, goes until 10 a.m. for almost everybody in the WYMT viewing area. The only exceptions, Campbell, Claiborne County, Lee County, Virginia, Wise County, and then Mingo, Logan, and Wayne County in West Virginia. Everybody else is under a freeze warning. Outside right now, we're seeing a mixture of sun and clouds, more sun than clouds now across Wayne County, Kentucky. And temperatures right now are in the 40s and 50s. 50s from Prestonsburg over to Monticello, upper 40s from Pikeville down to Wise. Logan's checking in with a temperature of 48 degrees. Now, as we help you plan the next several hours, we'll stay partly cloudy until we get to the overnight hours. We'll see temperatures going into the upper 20s and low 30s. Look at 6 a.m. 28 in Jackson, 29 Manchester. Hazard will go to 31. 35 will be the temperature in Harlan. Then we start to shoot back up in terms of temperature with highs in the upper 50s and low 60s. And the warming trend will continue as we go throughout the weekend. Details in the First Alert forecast in a few minutes. Steve.
All right, Eric, thank you. At least 25 people have died as the result of Hurricane Milton. In Sarasota, Florida, the hurricane caused damage to the Manasota Beach Club, which has been a staple on the Manasota Key for more than 100 years. The hurricane also caused, as we previously reported, damage to Tropicana Field, which is home to Major League Baseball's Tampa Bay Rays, including ripping off part of the dome's roof. A report from the Tampa Bay Times says it is unlikely that stadium will be ready for the team's opening day in March. Our parent company, Gray Media, is teaming up with the Salvation Army once again for hurricane relief efforts. You can make a financial donation by going to floridastormrelief.org. Just scan the QR code on your screen and you'll be directed to the right website to donate. SCOTUS, the Supreme Court, is allowing the EPA to temporarily enforce regulations on power plants over their emissions. The justices denied the emergency request filed by more than 20 Republican state attorneys general and industry groups. They had asked for the EPA's rules to be temporarily halted while legal challenges play out. Justices Brett Kavanaugh and Neil Gorsuch wrote the states and groups are likely to succeed on the merits of some of their challenges. Coming up on Mountain News at 5:30, a committee formed to look into ambulance surprise medical billing recently submitted their report to Congress. More about what this could mean for you the next time you need an ambulance.
And in the world of weather, we have that freeze warning that starts at midnight. We'll talk more about that in a few minutes. Stay with us.